and former president, and Donald, congratulations. And looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
Good.
Welcome
Thank you
back.
very much. And thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. A transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome.
When President-elect Donald Trump and President Joe Biden met at the Oval Office on Wednesday, it was all very, very genteel and affable. The two even shook hands. President Biden called for a peaceful transition of power.
Not everyone was happy about this, however. Some, like Charlamagne the God, even went as far as saying this was a betrayal of democratic values.
I just don't understand the White House visit. Now, granted, I'm glad it's a peaceful transition of power, but what happened to the threat of democracy talk? What happened to the fascist talk? By the way, I know I've said those things about Trump as well, but I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about his political opponents like President Biden. When they say it, it holds way more weight than me. I'm just trying to figure out, how do you go from he's an existential threat to democracy to welcome back?
He was happy too. He was happy. He was smiling. He was grinning. He was cheesing. Say cheese. He was cheesing, bro.
I'm just trying to figure out how. I understand President Biden believes in political norms, but damn.
Yeah, I think the response to Charlamagne the God there is that talk, the existential threat to democracy, fascist talk, was somewhat overblown. Even if I'm, being maximally charitable to that position, that Donald Trump is a little bit outside normal characteristics in terms of how he handled elections, but that a lot of the people using that rhetoric didn't actually believe it, and they got utterly thumped in the election and are now, to their credit, I think this is a good thing that Biden is being very respectful and magnanimous and talked about the importance of doing a transition of power. That's something Donald Trump should have done last time. It was not to his credit that he didn't. It actually hurt his own political ambitions, at least briefly, that he treated it that way. But it was nice to see. I'm happy to see both Biden and Trump handling this transition in a respectful of each other manner. Trump does seem to be gracious, at least in victory, not in defeat. But there was no laying it on thicker or using that moment to score more points. He wanted to kind of paper over things, is what it seemed like to me.
Well, the peaceful transition of power, very important. So I'm happy to see Biden and Harris helping to facilitate that. But I love Charlamagne the God. I think this is so funny because what he is doing is peeling back the curtain slightly on what's really going on. He's essentially calling out the game. And what he's saying is, you're either BSing us then, or you're BSing us now. If you're saying that Trump is Hitler, Nazi, fascist, how are you now chumming it up in the White House and saying everything's going to be okay? So, yes, I think this is very important. I feel a calling right now to share this with people, that the rhetoric in campaigns gets overblown. It's one reason why I find when I'm talking with my friends, I enjoy political debates because I understand how the rhetoric is formed and how it's communicated. But for most of my friends, they get a lot of heartburn from watching political debates. They hate seeing things like a fascist rising to power. And I think that people need to know that a lot of these messages are intentionally designed to divide us against each other for two reasons. It extracts dollars and it generates views for what they're doing. And I think that politicians need to be a lot more responsible about their rhetoric. Absolutely.
Not just politicians, members of the media as
Yes,
well, because frankly, some of the most over-the-top, hyperbolic rhetoric was not even coming from the campaign itself. It was coming from media allies and surrogates in the mainstream and in progressive media. And of course, there's extreme rhetoric in conservative media as well. Those are people I've seen on social media in many cases being like, but we said he's a fascist, and now they're just willingly giving up power to the fascists? You can't do that. So then you're advocating counter or anti-democratic measures to keep the Democrats in power. Well, that's exactly what the Republicans did or Trump did or you accuse them of doing. On some level, it just then becomes, an extreme elements of both sides are willing to countenance bad or extreme or anti-democratic measures to hang on to power, and that is actually not abnormal at all.
And this is one reason why trust is going down in politicians as well as in media. Trust is at an all-time low in media because the voters are wondering, do you really mean the words you're saying? I mean, go back to 2012, for example. Democrats said Mitt Romney was a huge threat.
I remember.
And,
now he's their hero now.
Yeah, exactly. And so that should just be an indication for the voters that whoever the villain is going to be, they're going to max out the outrage. Now, I do think, obviously, Trump is many steps further to the line of undermining democracy than Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney would have never incited an insurrection on the Capitol. So there are some real issues there. But I just think that Charlamagne is pointing out what's going on. I call it like seeing the Wizard of Oz. It's like if you go behind the curtain and you find out what's really happening. The viewers now are starting to see this gamesmanship that's really happening.
We're not in Kansas anymore. I think that was particularly true, not just of Mitt Romney. To watch Republicans be rehabilitated by Democrats and mainstream media solely for denouncing Trump, not for changing any of their other underlying positions. This is a little bit true of George W. Bush, who has been, I would say, mildly rehabilitated. And then it's very much true of the Cheney family, which has been massively and totally rehabilitated. Dick Cheney described as Darth Vader in stark authoritarian, evil terms. I was actually very critical of Dick Cheney throughout the Bush administration because the kind of interventionist, neoconservative bent of which he was the ideological master is not my ball of wax on the right at all. But now, because Liz Cheney, who's still an architect of, still a supporter of all sorts of, I would argue, ruinous foreign involvements, entanglements, and interventions. Now she was campaigning with Kamala alongside Kamala. There were talks of her being offered a job in the administration. She would have been the RFK Jr. figure of that administration, somebody from the other side who's welcomed in. And I found it so interesting. I did a monologue on this yesterday about the concerns among progressive staffers about Kamala going on Rogan, that was going to be offensive if she made an appearance on Joe Rogan to progressive staffers. I'm like, but progressive staffers you weren't afraid they'd be mad that you were palling around with Liz Cheney? It really goes to show some very misguided priorities, I think.
You can't go from Dick Cheney as Darth Vader and the architect of our worst foreign policy blunder, the Iraq invasion, in our lifetimes, and now trotting him out and almost like being proud to have that endorsement during a debate. It has to be more honest. Now, I believe in building wide coalitions,
sure,
a lot of people into your party, but it needs to be done authentically. Look at how Bernie Sanders, for example, does his endorsements of Biden or Harris. He says, we disagree on these issues, but we agree on these issues, and this is why I'm endorsing this person. They skipped over that step with Liz and Dick Cheney, and I think you're exactly right that you can't be more afraid of Joe Rogan than you're afraid of Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney's foreign policy. And by the way, that whole strategy didn't work. They did that endorsement in Ripon, Wisconsin, the birthplace of the Republican Party. Donald Trump increased his vote in Ripon, Wisconsin by 3 or 4 points. So didn't work.
What a great strategy. All right, coming up next, are we headed for some recounts in some of those very close states? We'll take a look at that. Stay tuned. More Rising right after this.